The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the Society of Massage Archives. These interviews and commentaries represent the recollections of both the hosts and the guests, and as such, are subject to the occasional slight inaccuracies. The content here is for informational and educational purposes only. You should conduct your own historical research when determining the veracity of any of the statements made within.
Greetings, and welcome to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives, where we delve into the rich tapestry of massage therapy's past, explore its evolution, and share the stories that have shaped this vital practice. Today is Monday, February 17th, 2025. I am your host, Kirby Clark Ellis, and I'm joined today by Don Dillon. Donald Quinn Dillon, RMT, is a practitioner, writer, and practice coach residing in the province of Ontario, Canada. His 33-plus years of practice include managing a multi-practitioner practice and active roles in representing his professional association to government, insurers, and gatekeeper healthcare disciplines. Dillon has been contracted as a subject matter expert with the Ontario regulator and for 8 years provided training and consulting with one of the corporate chains that employ hundreds of massage therapists. Dillon was a regular columnist for Massage Therapy Canada magazine for much of its history. He has guest lectured at several massage therapy schools and presented to massage therapy associations across Canada. Dillon contributed in a very small way to the 4th edition of Outcome-Based Massage by C.K. Andrade, an international textbook used by physiotherapists and massage therapists. You can find Dillon at dondillon-rmt.com. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Kirby. It's a great pleasure to be sitting with you here today, and I'm just so grateful for what you're doing with the Society of Massage Archives and attempting to remind us on a regular basis the history of this rich profession.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's our goal. And it's also an honor to be sitting here with you. And congratulations on being the Society's first international podcast guest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'll look for the gift package in the mail.
It might be delayed due to weather conditions. Let's jump into it, Don. Tell me what initially drew you to massage therapy as a profession. How did you get started?
Well, thank you. That was quite a happy accident, actually. I had didn't have much vocational direction as a young person, and my mother encouraged me to look at computers because that was the way of the future. Who knew? So I went to college for that and worked in the data processing industry for a while, but I was really quite unsatisfied with it. It just wasn't a good fit for me, and so I took well, I'd say a lateral, but a downward shift. It was a reduction in pay to work at a fitness club, but the personal engagement, the interaction with people, the one-on-one, as opposed to sitting in front of the computer screen all day, was a much better fit for me. And I did that for a while, and I moved up and became assistant manager and was doing quite well. But I'd have to say that I became I was actualized. I became bored and was looking for something new. And just by coincidence, and it's remarkable to think about this, but by coincidence, I was on my way home from a fitness workshop and I passed by the Sutherland Chan Massage School and Teaching Clinic. Now, if the school had been a block east or a block west, I would have completely missed it. But saw the sign, decided I was going to make a phone call, and turns out they had a trial to come for a weekend and try and see what massage therapy was like. And I was quite enthralled by it. You know, I had never had a massage before. I had read in the fitness magazines that massage was helpful in recovery and from injury and from athletic performance, but I didn't really have an appreciation of it. And I was just caught up. And then just coincidentally, they also had a sports massage workshop a few weekends later that I was allowed to attend, and by then I was just hooked. So I moved home and saved up some money and entered about a year later entered Sutherland Chan, and it was quite a wonderful and rich experience. And it's interesting to me that when I think of my qualities in terms of appreciating patterns in and engaging one-on-one with individuals and working with my hands, having a physical sense. Massage is a perfect application, but I don't imagine the guidance counselor in high school would have ever recommended massage therapy. They would have recommended me onto something else. So a number of happy circumstances ended me up in the field, and of course, it's been a very fulfilling uh, opportunity because early on I was recruited to come and speak on a couple of subjects in the field, initially charting, but I got involved in government relations and insurer relations with my field. I've also been invited across Canada to lecture. I've been on the World Massage Conference as well, a virtual conference, and I've been also invited to a number of schools. In a month, I'm going to Centennial College here in Ontario to speak to their graduating class. So it's been I just count my lucky stars because it's something that, again, if I hadn't walked by that massage college and taken a chance to take that weekend course, I'm not quite sure how things would have turned out for me.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think I get that message quite a bit here. Some guests have also expressed, life just being full of little surprises that completely change and in many ways enhance our lives.
Yeah.
Um, Don, so tell me, was massage therapy ever anything that you really had given much mind to? I mean, you said that you'd come across it in fitness publications and stuff like that. What really, when you decided to sign up for classes, what were you kind of expecting from going to a massage therapy program?
I really didn't have any expectations. I had no frame of reference. You know, when we think about why we're drawn to things, I mean, I was drawn initially because of my interest in the function of the body through fitness, and so I would say those are my initial attractions to learn more about it. But I suppose we all find when we're in this field over time, there are other things, unconscious things or subliminal things. So I think, like many practitioners do, I entered it for my own healing in many ways. I had wounds that I was attempting to address, and I could address those by helping others feel better. So it seems to me over the decades, there was probably some unconscious prompt for me to find out about massage. I didn't know about it at the time, but as the decades pass, I would say more and more I'm in tune with how massage has just fulfilled me in ways of addressing my own wounding. And my mother died last year, and for the last number of 12 years, I was quite involved in her care. And one of the things that I was able to do for her was to give her massage. And at the end, when she was quite inflexible, even just massaging her feet, and I could see the relief on her face. So it gave me a sense of agency. And I wondered, what do people do who don't have that acumen for massage, and they see their elderly parents in pain and suffering, and there's really nothing they can offer them. So I just think of the ways that I've been able to uh, touch and engage. And when I text people and I say I confirm their appointments, they say, "I can't wait, can't wait." And I don't think the dentist gets that. Oh, I can't wait to come in for dental care. Or I don't think the proctologist gets that kind of when they confirm appointments. So not well. Back to your original question. Nothing, very little consciously, I would say, other than an interest in the function of the body, but ultimately it has touched every aspect of my life.
Yeah. Um, First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I can't imagine going through that, but I love
Thank
what you
you.
said. That's beautiful that you shared um,
Yeah.
having some agency through the power of touch.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you for sharing that with us, Don.
Mm.
I want to know, what year did you sign up for those classes at Sutherland Chan?
Well, I entered school in '89, so I suppose the end of '88 was when I first signed up for the class, and then I saved money for about a year before I went back into the September 1989 enrollment.
Okay. All right. So into the 80s. And what did massage therapy look like in Canada around the 1980s?
Well, I imagine that we share a lot of similar history with our American cousins in that it was still a marginal field. When I entered, it had some loose regulation, no standards in place. It was very, very basic regulation under something called the Drugless Practitioners Act, which had been in place since 1919. So I think the people that were attracted to massage largely, it was a second career for many, where they had fulfilled certain vocational obligations, and now they wanted more liberty, they wanted more control over their time. And so I think when I think of my class, my original class, there were quite a few people that were in second career, but there were also a number of people who were closer to it was their first career, really. They were looking for something new and interesting. And I think in part, some of them were athletic, and so were attracted to the athletic benefits of massage. Other people were told when they were massaging a grandparent or a family member that they were really good at this and they should look at it as a career. So I suspect a lot of them were bypassing the traditional recommendations of becoming a lawyer or a doctor or accountant or uh, entering into one of the trades or settling in retail or other things. I suspect most massage therapists are a bit rebellious in nature and are looking for something off the beaten path. So when I entered school, there were four private vocational colleges, and the school I went to, Sutherland Chan, was started by Grace Chan and Christine Sutherland, and they had been students at one of the two original massage therapy colleges. Canadian College of Massage and Hydrotherapy was the original college. So I think it was largely people who were not interested in traditional vocations, looking for something different. It was people were respectful of massage. We had some trailblazers, I think, that normalized it, had moved it away from the association with the sex trades. And so it was becoming more legitimate, it had more credibility. So I was certainly a beneficiary, as many of my class were, of those early trailblazers. And then once I graduated, that was the same year that the Regulated Health Professions Act came into play. So the Regulated Health Professions Act was an umbrella act for all health disciplines who had been under various types of health regulation up to then. So that came into effect, and then shortly after, in 1994, the Massage Therapy Act came, which started the listing of standards. So that's where the beginnings of our standards of practice, code of ethics developed. And then since then, we've had a number of other legislative pieces, the Personal Health Information Protection Act, FIPA, the Informed Consent Act. So there's been more recently in terms of patient protection acts around misconduct and sexual inappropriate touch and such. So a lot has happened in the last 33 years, but I would say I was right at the tip of the hill in terms of it from the fairly loose origins to becoming more an established profession in our culture.
I like the way you described that of being at the tip of the hill. Did you get a sense of that while you were living through it, Don, that you were at the kind of a tip like that?
Well, I suppose part of my only exposure to the profession were the teachers we had. And we had some wonderful teachers that gave us a broad level of exposure. So we had a sports massage teacher, for example, that worked with the Toronto Ballet, and he was a big muscular Russian, So we had that perspective, and then we had some athletes, some massage therapists who had been involved in athletics, and so they brought that component. And then we had teachers that showed me areas that I had not any experience with. So more on the bioenergetic side and also on the sense that the person we were working on wasn't just a physical instrument, like repairing a muffler on a car, that there was a person underlying and so the need to blend the science and the empirical evidence of the techniques and what the techniques did and how they were applied and precautions to applying the techniques in certain populations, that was coupled with individuals that I would say gave us a very rich experience to trying to be contemplative and reflective and look inward and try to understand who we are and how we could open ourselves to working with some pretty challenging populations. One of my placements was at Variety Village, which is a tremendous fitness institution in the Toronto area, and it largely there are able-bodied individuals, but it's set up the weight equipment, the resistance training equipment, the tracks, the basketball courts are set up for individuals who have disabilities, who are wheelchair bound. So that was a phenomenal experience for me to try and expand my ideas of who I would and could work with, and also challenge me, of course, to develop personally as well as professionally, so I could provide care to those populations.
Gotcha. Tell me, how long was that program?
It was and still is, I believe, it's 2 years. So we have private vocational colleges. They're largely 2-year programs, and then there are the private career colleges, and I think they're also 2 years. And then we also have community colleges, which receive some of their funding from the government, a third of their funding from the government, and they're a 3-year program. So they fill in their programs more with electives and things, but it's still at this point a 2-year program, community college a 3-year program, and I think some of the private colleges offer what they call advanced, which are an additional year for additional learning and development, I suppose. So I guess you could go up to 3 years as well.
Interesting. Talk to me, Don, what are some of your early influences when you entered the profession?
Well, I had quite a few American influences, actually. I subscribed to Massage Magazine and read that fervently. Massage Therapy Journal, I also subscribed to. And we also had some very good Canadian publications, The Body Politic, which talked about the culture of the profession, as well as the Journal of Soft Tissue Manipulation, which was more on the technical, functional, structural side of things. So those are very helpful. I was involved with the board of directors of my professional representative early on. So those individuals helped to shape and hone. I was pretty rough around the edges, I would say, and a diamond in the rough, I'll say. And so those people were very helpful to shape and mold me as well. I took some early workshops with the Upledger Institute, and but then more intensively with Paul St. John, the Paul St. John Neuromuscular Therapy. That was very influential in my approach and the practice and the way that I did things. I was moved by a number of writers. So Dean Juhan, who wrote Job's Body, a handbook of bodywork, I would say his book, more than most, have shaped and formed my theory and philosophy of approaching care. If you're not read Dean Juhan, and his original book, I've got a copy here just beside me for reference, but I think it's about almost 40 years old now. But he started his background originally in writing. That was going to be his degree, until he had another accidental happy accident. He happened upon the Esalen Institute and then became a teacher in training and eventually in residence there. But his ability to write about the particularities of how we affect structure and function, I've not seen the eloquence of writing similar to Dean Juhan. So Dean Juhan's a big influence on me. I've also was influenced by Don Hanlon Johnson, who wrote Bone, Breath, and Gesture, and talks about the origins of not just massage, but a variety of disciplines in our field that have merged and come together. Stanley Kellerman, Emotional Anatomy, was another influence as well. And of course, I'm influenced in current days by exemplaries in the profession. So you've had a number of them on the podcast already. Sandy Fritz. Uh, I'm new to Benny Vaughn. I really liked what he had to say, and David Lauderstein as well. All people that I was unfamiliar with, but I'm quite enamored with them, as well as Whitney Lowe and James Waslowski. So many of our American cousins have been a real influence, as well as Canadian exemplaries. Pamela Fitch, who I think a number of your listeners may be familiar with some of her excellent work on boundaries, setting boundaries. Trish Dryden, Doug Alexander as well, Grace Chan. More recently, Bodie Harrelson out in British Columbia. So there are a number of individuals on both sides of the border that really have affected me. And of course, I've been tremendously affected by the reciprocal relationships, reciprocal care relationships that I've had with colleagues of mine. Current colleague Crystal, we've had a reciprocal relationship for I think about 7 years. And when you give and receive care from someone for that length of time, you really get to read and understand not just the body, but the psyche as well that exists within the body. It's a tremendous opportunity, and I've learned a great deal through these reciprocal relationships I've had as well.
Sure. Let me ask you then, Don, as a follow-up, have you done much travel across the border into the States for some of those trainings that you mentioned?
I have come over for some Paul St. John workshops. I attended a research symposium. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was in Seattle, Washington. That was a great event. That was 2010, I believe. So I've been there. I was at the American Massage Conference in Atlanta, probably back in 2017, 18, somewhere around there. So I have been a few times, and of course I've attended some virtual conferences as well, put on by our American counterparts.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, let's not ignore the elephant in the room anymore, so to speak, Don. You hail from Canada. Tell me about the regulation and the representation in Canada.
Sure. Well, I'm going to use my little crib notes over here, so I make sure I get all the I've got all the details. So I should qualify. I'm not speaking on behalf of Canada. Canada is a big nation, something like 10 million square kilometers. So I'm going to. There's about 23,000 estimates massage therapists in Canada. So I'm just one of those, and I'll speak from my particular perspective if I could. And each province has a education, so they'll have schools in the province. Provinces are like states. So we have 10 provinces, 3 territories. So each of the 10 provinces has a professional representative that represents the interest of the practitioners. 5 of the provinces have regulators, which is put in place for protection of the public. So that's the body in charge of setting the standards, ensuring the code of ethics is followed, and disciplining any practitioners that would violate those. So right now, just half of our provinces have regulation. And I believe, and this is what I know less about, is I believe most provinces probably have schools. In Ontario, we have 56 programs. You remember that I said when I first started there were 4. Now there's 56 programs just in Ontario, and but I'm less aware of the schools in the other provinces, so I can't comment on that. In terms of regulation, the Drugless Practitioners Act was enacted in 1919. It was an umbrella legislation that overlooked the massage practitioners, the chiropractors, the osteopathic practitioners, naturopathic practitioners. So we were all under that umbrella. We broke off and distinguished ourselves from the physiotherapists in 1935 and formed a regulatory body called the Board of Directors of Masseurs. The Drugless Practitioners Act was in place for, what was that, about 70 years or so, and then it was repealed in 1991 for the Regulated Health Professions Act, and that brought all of the health disciplines under one umbrella: physicians, nurses, chiropractors, physiotherapists, massage therapists, dentists. We're all under that one. So it was several disparate acts before and then brought us under all one. And then each of those disciplines had their own act. So we have the Massage Therapy Act that was enacted in 1994. And that then the name of our regulator was changed from the Board of Directors of Masseurs to the College of Massage Therapists of Ontario. Now, it's important to distinguish here, the word college actually pertains to a regulator. So we have the College of Physicians and Surgeons, the College of Nurses and Nurse Practitioners, the College of Physiotherapists, the College of Massage Therapists. So just to be clear, when I say college, and I'll try to use regulator as a term just so we don't mix things up. But when I say the College of Massage Therapists, I'm talking about the regulator. So in terms of representation in Ontario, there was a body formed in 1936, and that was just after we split from a regulation point of view from the physiotherapists. There was an act called the Associated Masseurs, and that was later changed to the Society of Registered and Remedial Masseurs. And again, largely, I believe the profession was largely male, so that's why it is masseurs. But the name changed again as more women were welcomed into the profession. It became the Ontario Massage Therapist Association in 1973, and then in 2010 it underwent another name change, the Registered Massage Therapists of Ontario, which at this point we have about close to 16,000 massage therapists that under the College of Massage Therapists that are regulated, and under the professional representative, about 43 to 44% of those are members of the professional representative. That's the RMTAO, the Registered Massage Therapists Association of Ontario. So the regulator and the professional representative, again, two distinct roles. Under education, as I mentioned, when I went to school in 1989, there were 4 private vocational colleges. It's since grown to include community colleges and private career colleges. There are 56 programs in Ontario. British Columbia was the only other regulated province for many years. A little bit about British Columbia, that's on the West Coast. I should maybe orient people for where I am. I am in Ontario. I live close to the, four blocks up from me, I can go out and look at Lake Ontario. So I'm about 25-minute drive from Niagara Falls. So we're very close to the Canada-American border. And so we're in central Canada, and British Columbia, what I'm about to talk to, that's over on the West Coast. So that's over near Washington, on that side of things. So British Columbia was the only other regulated province for many years. In 1946, they had the Association of Physiotherapists and Massage Practitioners, the APMP of British Columbia. So the physiotherapists and massage therapists were co-joined in terms of their regulation. However, in the 1980s, the registered physiotherapists sought to discredit the training and scope of massage therapists. I suppose part of the motivation was that they were all being compensated under the same medical services plan, and I suppose the physiotherapists wanted that for themselves. So they started to discredit the profession of massage therapists, and the massage therapists, as I understand it, really had to push back to establish their credibility. So they formed a separate representative in 1982, and now the Registered Massage Therapists Association of British Columbia, that's the professional representative, is the current iteration. I should point out as well, when we're talking about these, that You've probably heard that Canada has universal healthcare. So healthcare is available to all Canadian citizens. It's important to point out that while if you have a heart problem or a lung problem or a kidney problem or a gastrointestinal problem, we do have universal healthcare for those things, and we're very grateful to have access to healthcare regardless of a financial means. But that does not, for whatever reason, and I've been trying to get an answer to this, does not cover the remedial therapies for physical function and addressing physical pain. So physiotherapy, chiropractic, and massage therapy are not covered under universal healthcare. So people have to pay out of pocket, or if they have some workplace health insurance, they typically a limited amount, they can cover it with some of that. So just as a side note, and this is something that distinguished British Columbia against all the other provinces. At one point, they were covered under, you could opt in to be covered under the medical services plan. So that means every man, woman, child in British Columbia could access massage therapy if the massage therapist had opted under the benefit plans. So it removed barriers to care, in other words, for people who may not be able to afford care otherwise. However, when government changed, and I believe the date is 2004, if I have this correctly, so now British Columbia is also like the rest of the provinces. For massage therapy, you have to pay out of pocket, or if you're fortunate enough to have workplace benefits, you can pay with your workplace benefits plan. British Columbia had a similar regulatory update in Ontario when we talked about the Regulated Health Professions Act in 91. British Columbia had a similar update in 95. But here's where British Columbia is distinctive again, and I think this is very interesting, is that British Columbia's health authority amalgamated more recently in 2024, or over the last couple of years, amalgamated 30 healthcare disciplines, 30 distinct healthcare disciplines that would have had their own regulators, all under 6 regulators. So now massage therapists are in the same regulator organization called the Complementary Health Professionals of British Columbia, with naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, and traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncturists as well. So before they used to have a college to their, or a regulator to their own, now they're amalgamated with 3 other disciplines under the same regulator. And there's some speculation that might help happen in Ontario, because really it's a reduction of bureaucracy, it's a streamlining. And I would argue that, there's some opportunities here, because these other disciplines that I've mentioned have some similar interests in as we do in terms of research literacy and public and media relations and government relations. So there might be some benefit for there as well. Again, as I mentioned, in education, I'm unfamiliar with the origins of most of the schools outside of Ontario, but I do challenge our my fellow Canadians that we should be, just like you're doing with SOMA, we should be collecting this information about the origin of these schools and having it as a repository so that we can tap into it. I've got a bit more on this subject. I just want to check in and see if I've been clear so far. If you have any questions, Kirby, before I go on to a little bit more about the history and the regulation and such.
It is a lot of ground to cover. I think I've come up with at least a few questions, if it's all right to jump in right here.
Please. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the Regulated Health Professions Act in the early 90s, would it be a leap to assume that kind of puts you on equal footing with those other sort of disciplines?
My understanding of the history was it was an attempt, especially for the largely female-dominated disciplines, the nursing and occupational therapy, physiotherapy, massage therapy. They were all largely, and still are, I believe, largely female-dominated. And so the Regulated Health Professions Act, the RHPA, was an attempt in part to try and bring equity to what was a disequity in terms of the recognition of the 2 sexes and how they were regulated, and the I guess, the credibility assigned to them. So yes, in part, and as a result, we also, as a discipline, I think it has established more credibility for us when we come to the table if we're talking with insurers who are processing claims for massage therapy, or if we are approaching government and we want some changes to positively affect the public access to massage therapy. Yes, my long answer is yes. The Regulated Health Professions Act, by putting us all under the same umbrella, likely brings a level of credibility and equity that wasn't available when we were all disparate acts. Yes.
Gotcha. Also, in case anybody listening to this is unfamiliar with the term, could you define, even in your own words, remedial massage? Because I know that that's more commonly used outside of the United States.
I think we're and I'm gonna infuse our cultures here because I think we really have a very similar culture in America and in Canada. So we also struggle with the identities and naming things. And is it relaxation massage or wellness massage? So I think we're still debating those aspects. So when I say remedial, and I think we're going to get a chance to talk about this in a little bit, but massage therapy serves a broad number of populations with very distinct and particular needs. So the population that is looking for wellness or relaxation or rejuvenation is a different population that's looking for remediation of injury and loss of function and persistent pain. So when I don't want to give the impression when I use that word remedial is that it is standard in Canada. I think we're still struggling too with how we differentiate between the different populations we serve and how that affects the massage we provide and the outcomes we're ultimately seeking to achieve.
Gotcha. And then in terms of when you say working with insurers, if massage therapy is not covered in the universal health care, where does working with insurers really fit in? Can you square that away for me, Don?
Sure. So the insurers, you may recall I mentioned that uh, the therapies for physical function, so chiropractic, physiotherapy, and massage, are not covered under our universal health plans. So that gap is made up somewhat by private insurers who offer extended health benefits either through the workplace or for individuals that are retiring and want to purchase extended health benefits. So those are the insurers we're having relations with. Although in some of our government relations, we're also pressing for support from government for things like, for example, in auto insurance, if an individual is injured in auto insurance in Ontario, there's quite a bit of paperwork to have to go through, and massage therapists can't simply begin a treatment plan with an individual. That treatment plan has to be signed off by one of the gatekeeper health disciplines. So one of the gatekeepers would be a physician or a nurse practitioner or a chiropractor, for example. So sometimes we use our government relations exercises to try and affect things like that, where we're asking to remove that requirement that an individual has to, who's acutely injured and is looking for relief as soon as possible, to have to jump through that extra hoop of seeing your massage therapist and then having them fill out the paperwork and then going to the physician and having them sign the paperwork so you can go back and get the massage therapy treatment. We're trying to use some of our government relations to influence insurer relations as that, but largely it's for extended health benefits that don't cover the therapies that to restore physical function or relieve physical pain. Those are the kind of the regular negotiations we're trying to have with insurers, and it's not easy. The insurers, there was a campaign a number of years ago by one of the major insurers to try and discredit the chiropractic physiotherapy and massage therapy, saying they were causing they were costing a lot of money, and they weren't showing sufficient efficacy in terms of their results, and why don't we divert those insurance dollars to cancer drugs or drugs for more serious illnesses? And that made the national media. There was a piece in the national media about that as well. So we have a bit of a tug and pull relationship with insurers in terms of justifying and legitimizing massage therapy claims.
That makes a lot of sense, and it also answers a question that perhaps I was tiptoeing and nervous to ask about gatekeepers. So thank you for including that in your answer, Don. Just a few more here.
Sure.
Registration. That when we hear that in the United States, that would suggest that it is voluntary to do. Is registration as a massage therapist a mandate?
So the regulator has the scope of their power is they can protect titles. So massage therapist or registered massage therapist are protected titles. No other person can hold themselves out with those titles if they're not registered. So we attend education programs just like you do in the United States, and then we have to pass a series of exams. And then there's another set of exams in order to become registered with the regulator. And you'll recall that I said only 5 of our provinces are regulated. So the other provinces that are not regulated have to do a bit of a dual duty in terms of overseeing standards and espousing standards, because they don't have a regulator to oversee that. And as a result, title protection is not offered in those provinces. So they have more of a problem with people holding themselves out in those particular titles. So registration, if you want to be licensed as a registered massage therapist and you want to be able to bill insurance and use the title and hold yourself out to the public as having that standard, you have to be. It's mandatory to be registered with the regulator. Now, professional association membership, our professional representative, that is not mandatory. That is voluntary. And you may recall that our professional association in Ontario, I've been watching this for years, but they tend to be around 43-44% of all massage therapists. So unfortunately, not all the massage therapists are supporting our representative, which is a real problem, of course, when you're trying to manage relations with the government, public and media relations, gatekeeper, health discipline relations, insurer relations. We really need the support of the vast majority, but membership in the professional representative is voluntary at this point.
Gotcha. That clears a lot up for me. That kind of also brings up another question that I'm curious about, Don. If there are 5 provinces that are regulated right now, is there much collaboration amongst the provinces, or is there quite a bit of distinction, separation, and isolation in terms of the profession?
There's an organization that began in 2003. It's called the Federation of Massage Therapy Regulatory Colleges, I think. FOMTRAC is FOMTRAC, if anybody wants to put that in the search engine. But my understanding, and I haven't been involved with this organization, but my understanding is there's quite a bit of collaboration as they share information in terms of helping to bring up the regulatory colleges. And I should say that it was British Columbia and Ontario for the longest time were the only regulated colleges. And then in 2003, Newfoundland, Labrador became regulated, followed by New Brunswick in 2011 and Prince Edward Island in 2019. A number of the other provinces have been working toward regulation, but right now those are the 5 regulated provinces in Canada, and none of the territories at this point are regulated.
Gotcha. I think my last question before we can get back into it is if your education standards are anywhere from 2 to 3 years, that is a vast amount of hours, or it sounds like a vast amount of hours compared to 6, 7, 9-month programs. So I'm just curious, something that we also struggle with here in America, in the United States, is We're struggling with the ideas of academia because we're not an academic field of study.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if you have any insights from the Canadian perspective on any of that.
Sure. Yeah. And I would say I'd recommend subsequently you might want to consider Pamela Fitch as a guest because she was an educator for a number of years and is quite intimate with these details of things. So I'll give you my very general understanding, and but I'd recommend in future if education is a topic you want to go in further, Pamela Fitch would be an excellent guest. So we moved from a hours-based program, which was 2,200 hour standard. In British Columbia, it was actually 3,000 hours. So there was a bit of tension there for a while between British Columbia and Ontario in terms of who had the highest standards.
Yeah.
And that moved to a program based on interjurisdictional competencies. So the idea of if I was in one province and I wanted to move to another province, how could I make sure that there was a certain standard of education? So we moved away from time-based to interjurisdictional competencies. And my understanding is the school's job is to make sure that they're addressing all those competencies in their program, however long that takes. Some schools, it would be a 2-year program. Some years it would be a 3-year program. Schools, it would be a 3-year program. But it's no longer time-based. It's based on competencies, and that's what they test for.
Gotcha. All right. Excellent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I think. Do you come out of it with an academic degree though, Don, in Canada?
We have our school system is, and I think there's some similarities to the American, but we have community colleges, which you come out with a diploma, and or private vocational colleges, you come out with a diploma, and then you have to go to a university to get a degree. So there currently is not a degree program, although there's been much discussion and interest. And what some therapists will do here is if you have your diploma from a community college, there can be transferable credits. So you can take your massage therapy diploma in a community college and apply to, and there's a couple of universities that do this. Some of them are, I understand, distance education too. So you can do it from home and you can apply toward a applied health science degree. So that's available, but it's not a distinct degree in massage therapy per se.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, it
Yeah.
sounds like it whenever that you say 2 to 3 years is immediately what comes to mind for me, because I can imagine a lot of American listeners just saying, forget it, 2 to 3 years. There's some who don't have the patience for 9 months, so it sounds very intensive work.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it mimics other private vocational or community college. I mean, if you're going to school, it would be something that you would be counting on 2 to 3 years to do at least. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, tell me more about the perspectives, the Canadian perspectives of regulation and representation, Don.
Well, I think I've probably covered all of that in what we've discussed, but I wonder if it would be of interest maybe just to give some comparisons between the United States of America and the Canadians in terms of massage therapists, because I have come across social media posts and been in other conversations where I've noticed that our American cousins will often say, oh, the Canadians have it right, they're doing it right, they've got a high standard. And I think it might be of interest just to do a little comparisons and find out that in many ways our American cousins actually have an advantage, if that's okay if I talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I would love to hear your perspectives comparing the two.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we have universal health care, which thankfully covers a number of conditions, pathologies, illnesses, but does not cover, other than orthopedic surgery, does not cover the restoration of physical function or the relief of physical pain. So people often, even though we hear that name, universal healthcare, it's important to recognize massage therapy is not covered under universal healthcare. It is paid out of pocket, or if a person has extended health benefits. I mentioned already only half of our Canadian provinces are regulated. So it took us 25 years to regulate from the first province to the fifth. So it's taking us some time to do that, and we can expect some time more. So we're as much as we're moving in the proper direction, we still have quite a ways to go. And again, none of the territories are regulated. Massage therapists work largely, as I suspect, in the same in America, in private offices, in spas, or renting rooms from chiropractors or physical therapists, or home-based practice. So by and large, except for very few exceptions, we are not working in hospitals. We are not working in community health centers, which would be staffed by physicians and nurses and social workers and other health. So there's a wall there. There's a real divide between, although we're a regulated health discipline in Ontario, we are not mixing or working with, in large part, with other healthcare professionals. There's an accreditation process for schools. It was a number of years in the making. It started getting steam in 2015, so almost 10 years in at this point. Most of the schools in Canada are not yet accredited, and in Ontario, the province I'm in, less than half are fully accredited. So we're still a long ways in terms of having our schools all at an accreditation standard. In terms of research, I have to say, and this is, I have great envy for our American cousins, because I admire how your U.S. Department of Health and Human Services sets aside money for the National Institute of Health for their Center for Complementary and Integrated Health in order to do research into complementary and integrative therapies. We don't have anything like that in Canada. There's no endorsement by the Canadian government to invest, as far as I've seen or know, invest in research into these promising therapies like massage therapy or chiropractic or naturopathic. We don't have that. We did for a number of years invest, but from 2006 to 2017, so over 11 years, our regulator in Ontario and the Representative Association in British Columbia put in money toward research grants. So we were trying to engender research projects. And that worked out to about $59,000 a year over those 11 years. So a fairly substantial investment. But more recently, we no longer have an agency in Canada that oversees research grants into massage therapy. So all of the provinces put a collective $10,000 Canadian into the American Massage Therapy Foundation, and they manage those funds. And I guess we have a mutual relationship with the MTF in order to be able to access their research abstracts and stuff. So we've stepped back a bit, unfortunately, in terms of research investment in massage. I should say as well, we suffer, and I think some very similar problems as in the United States in terms of disingenuous and awful media coverage. I mean, when you see massage in the media, it's often associated with insurance fraud or association with the sex trade or with some form of misconduct. So we struggle with those issues, and we have strained relationships, like I say, with the insurers. We have an issue right now where we have this, it's called a consumption tax. It's called the HST, Harmonized Sales Tax. And we have been trying to unload that sales tax. Most health disciplines in Canada, it's a federal tax. Most disciplines do not have to charge the HST, therefore do not have to pass that on to their patients or clients. We still have, it's a 13%, so it's not a small tax. Yeah. We have to pass that on to our patients or clients. And we've had a number of occasions where we've met with government, and we thought it was going to be a slam dunk this past year, but you may hear our federal government is in quite a bit of turmoil. And so that has been put off on a shelf somewhere. So we are still charging the HST. And this in light of the fact that acupuncturists and naturopathic practitioners which I think most of us would categorize as less centrist as massage. I mean, you're more likely to think of massage in hospitals than you would think of naturopaths or acupuncturists in hospitals. These are smaller disciplines, but they managed 11 years ago now, they managed to organize and lobby and become HST exempt. So it's a real thorn in our side. So I want to just, I'm sharing all this information because I think it's important for our American cousins to understand we don't have it so good up here in terms of, we have a lot of struggles and we share some similar struggles as well too. And it's certainly not a reflection of the decision makers, either past or present, in terms of not moving along on regulation and representation and lobbying for these issues like the HST. I really think that our profession is challenged with engaging practitioners who work in their private offices all day and probably don't engage very often with the larger collective, and galvanizing those individuals and using that collective human equity to be able to affect change. So I think it's a systemic problem in our culture, in our profession. Is we can move things a lot faster if we would learn how to engage and galvanize and organize and work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm hearing whenever that you bring up things like that our federal government funds research for the NIH, and I think it's also a call for us to not set it and forget it, so to say. Like, we have a tendency, and I don't know if this is similar to you, it sounds like it might be, that we want someone else to do the work for us, and then
Yeah.
we just want to blindly trust that it will always be there, and we tend to take things like that for granted.
Yeah.
It's a call to keep that in the front of your mind, and if you enjoy those benefits, to work and make sure that they aren't taken away, right? Because you talk about federal government in turmoil.
Yeah.
I mean, we're right there with you in my eyes. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of changes on your side of the border too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. If I could just maybe elaborate on that point,
Please.
I think when we talk about a representative government or a representative organization, inherent within that description is that we're hiring somebody to represent us. And I think, unfortunately, what we do is we then say, well, we've hired somebody to do that for us. I can now just focus on the day-to-day activities in my life, and I can let my representative. But most people don't meet their representatives, whether it's the professional association or your local municipal government. Most of us don't meet our representatives. Therefore, we can't let them know what our interests are, and we can't engage in a discussion with them. So I think we need to take a very activist view that having representative organizations doesn't exclude us from participating. In fact, we need to participate. The more of us that participate and engage and interact, we may talk about this later, but I was just looking at the ABMP did a survey, and they figured there's 321,000 massage practitioners in the United States. And if you combine that with Canada, we've got almost 350,000. That's a lot of people that if we were all doing something to help lobby and advocate and represent, we could get a lot done in this profession.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your lips to creators' ears. I'm telling you, Don. Yeah. More engagement, people. Engage, show up, make a difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how we've gotten this far. Like you talked about at the start of our conversation, we kind of stand on the paths that were cleared for us. And that's why history is so important. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, Don, talk to me about the historical trajectory of massage therapy in a Canadian sense, but if you can, also an international sense too.
Sure. Well, I think that I think our American cousins and our Canadian practitioners, I think we're woven into a common history. So And I think it's helpful to look at it from a social economic view lens as opposed to a chronological date and time, which we've covered dates and times in terms of the Canadian. But I think it's important to consider what are the things that happened in history that help shape and form our profession. So I think that fertile ground was laid for our common history in North America. We had the manufacturing had produced the machines of war, and that then switched to production of consumer goods, automobiles and washing machines and road construction and housing as well. So this, with the need of, with the passing of the wars and the advancement of North America as a manufacturing powerhouse, that created better working conditions for people. They had more leisure time because unions petitioned for them to have more leisure times. Women entered the workplace, so there were surplus jobs because they needed more skilled trade workers. So people in general, economically, had more money, more time on their hands, and I think that drove the development of our profession in 5 key areas. So first, we have the remedial. We used that word earlier. Remedial, meaning the treatment of specific conditions. That started in the world wars with treating individuals who had been injured during the war, but also with the advent of physical illnesses where there were side effects like polio, for example. And that led way to massage therapy involved in being integrated with physiotherapy in terms of physical function and relieving pain. Now you can find massage therapists treating people remedially who've been in car accidents or workplace related injuries. And as I mentioned, you can often have workplace benefit plans to help you pay for those kind of treatments. We also have the athletic and fitness area. You had Benny Vaughn on recently. So people had more expendable time. They wanted to develop themselves physically. They wanted to be fit. They wanted to reduce chances of comorbidities. And as a result of all of this fitness of the, you might, Kirby, maybe you've seen some of the videos of the 1980s aerobics classes where they're jumping up and down on concrete floors. I mean, that must have resulted in quite a few massages, I think, after that. So people participated in sports, they suffered injuries, or they wanted to improve their athletic performance. And so that contributed to a very different population with distinct needs for massage. Then we have the hedonism or the spa, where people who aren't injured, who aren't in pain or loss of physical function, they just want to feel better. They want to be taken care of. They want to indulge themselves because of the workplace and the household demands they have on themselves. So the European spa model is adopted so that people can pursue these things. They can, we hear terms like wellness and rejuvenation and regeneration. Those are different goals than the remedial massage provides. And I saw one report where the health and wellness industry is, I think it's $3.4 trillion. Like, it's huge. And massage makes a big part of that. It's a huge industry of people seeking massage for their health and well-being. We also had similar threads in our origins, and particularly in the United States and the Esalen Institute, into the human potential movement. So during the 60s, people were experimenting. They were moving away from traditional values and experimenting with a variety of new ideas. Eastern philosophy was being adopted, meditation, yoga, those practices were entering into the United States and eventually Canada in terms of practices. And these were people who wanted to not just exist, but self-actualize, to become more fully human. And they call it the human potential movement. And so psychotherapy and massage therapy had similar origins that way in terms of developing into these disciplines where we're not just overcoming pain or loss of function or even feeling better. We are becoming more fully ourselves. We're realizing more of our human potential. And then there's the worker performance as well. We talked about athletic performance. More and more companies are looking to massage as a way of increasing attention spans and alertness and productive thinking by providing massage right into the workplace. They've got it built in right into the workplace. There's a place here in Ontario, Husky Injection Molding, and they invest, this is an old number, but they invest about $1 million a year in their employees. They have on-site daycare, they have massage and other therapies, they have a physical fitness place. They've got a variety of things up above and beyond just a paycheck, and their turnover is something like 25% of average compared to other companies. So people want to work there, they want to stay there. It reduces turnover. So big payoffs when you combine massage with workplace. And maybe we should stop here and just talk about, because I've talked about 5 areas where the social economic influences have affected our field and have created an opportunity for practitioners like yourself and myself to be able to thrive, to develop practices. So I notice in the profession there can be this reductionism, right? This idea of this is what a massage looks like, and if you're something else, you're not a massage therapist. So there's these fights that go on between if spa massage is real massage and is relaxation really a thing, and do the remedial therapists, are they missing out on the treating the whole person? So we have these kind of intrinsic arguments amongst ourselves, and I would say I don't see it as a plausible argument at all, because if we think about what the marketplace needs and the various populations that we're serving and the very particular needs, the distinctions between those 5 categories I talked about, and the distinctive needs of those people who seek massage therapy, we don't need to be fighting about fitting us all into one identity or one whole. We can serve multiple, and there's a strength, there's a diversity. I mean, if you think in nature, if we had monocultures are very prone to disease, right? If you have all the same tree or all the same crop, we don't have a monoculture in this profession, and we shouldn't fight for one. We shouldn't be arguing for one. We should recognize that we serve a lot of different needs and particular populations. And I'll just quote here something from Hunter Levins that I find helpful. You have to take your values from your customers, your designs from nature, and your discipline from the marketplace. You have to take your values from your customers, your designs from nature, and your discipline from the marketplace. And maybe I'll just finish off answering this question, Kirby, with a consideration. And this is about accountability, I would say, is that because of all of these socioeconomic factors that contributed to the development of massage therapy in North America and other places in the world, it is, as a result, created a whole industry. I mean, if you think about it, in Canada, I know, for example, we spend millions, tens of millions of dollars a year on education, representation, and regulation. So the development of our profession has created a whole industry that needs to be serviced by regulators and hired representatives and teachers that teach in schools and the organization. So I think we need to think about that our little profession is being supported by tens of millions, maybe, if we consider the States, maybe, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in these 3 investments. So I think as a method of accountability, we should always be assessing and considering the investment, the return on investment that we're getting when we're investing in education, representation, and regulation.
Yeah, interesting. That's such a thoughtful way to look at it. Those 5 key areas of socioeconomic drives that have influenced the profession. I'm also wondering, to get down into the nitty-gritty of it, Don, in with some of these recent changes that have been going on in Canada, I believe you spoke earlier about, is it British Columbia that has the informed consent recent regulation edition?
Any of the 5 regulated provinces would have a number of additional regulations to the Massage Therapy Act, including informed consent and personal health information would be another example. Setups around conducts for reducing misconduct. So in addition to the Regulated Health Professions Act and the Massage Therapy Act, there would be a number of additional legislative pieces that have been added on, and those should be right across all the 5 regulated provinces.
Gotcha. All right. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Don.
Hmm.
Talk to me about what is a historical perspective in massage therapy? Why is it significant? Why does it matter?
Well, I'm in such appreciation of what you're doing here, Kirby. I know you're taking time and energy to make these podcasts, to talk to individuals that have a history in the profession and to keep it alive, and what the Society of Massage Archives is doing. I think this is such a critical and important component to our sense of identity and our sense of continuity and longevity as a discipline. I mean, let's be candid. One reason why we're having this discussion today is because our history is being threatened. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. But so if you'll permit me, I'm going to digress a bit just to elaborate on why I think history matters and why I think it's under threat. So maybe our audience who's tuning in, I want to ask them a question. And I want to ask you, what is your relationship to the history and legacy of massage therapy? Do you hold regard for it or contempt? Do you think it is antiquated and fossilized? Do you put your conviction in technology and evidence-based practice? How do you look at history? How do you consider history? And I think that our views on that question go beyond our discipline into the West. In the West in general, I think we've seen a degradation over time of an appreciation for history. Since the World Wars, which were a time of collectivism, of we're all in this together, let's help each other out, we have moved steadily toward more materialist and individualist perspective in terms of how we see things. I had read a book by American psychologist Jean Twenge, that's Twenge, where she outlines this in the narcissism epidemic. But our pop culture worships celebritism. We take our public health direction and our political viewpoints and our relationship and financial advice from actors and grifters and social media influencers. We don't trust authorities anymore. We blame previous generations for the housing crisis and the financial crisis and the political crisis and the climate crisis, the job market crisis. And of course there are valid reasons for that, because what we've done is we've really harmed the hope and the optimism of the upcoming generations. We've shown them that we are not dealing with our stuff, which every generation is obligated to do, to deal with their crises and their challenges of the time, so that it's not kicked down the road to the next generation. And I think, unfortunately, ever since the World Wars, where we were working together, we have moved increasingly to a point where we're kicking obligations down the road. So naturally, the next generation is disenfranchised. They relate to the homeless and the indigenous and people that are oppressed and ethnic minorities, because they see themselves in them. They see that disenfranchisement that they feel themselves. So I think that I believe every generation has its challenges, and what technology has done, our current circumstance has done with social media and the like, has really widened that gap between the generations. And this is And this is detrimental to a craft like ours because our origins are based on the development of a theory and a philosophy of care and a trial and an area and a trial and error, sorry, and seeing what happens. And we then apply that, and then people want to learn that, and then more people want to learn from them. And there's this whole development that occurs when you build upon an original theory and philosophy. But if you discount all that, if you say none of that is relevant anymore, we're just going to start from here and now and today, that's kind of like building a house without a foundation underneath it. So I appreciate how subsequent generations are very terse and averse when it comes to the criticisms they have of the theories and practices of practitioners that have come before them, and they believe, the younger generations believe, that the path to legitimacy and credibility in the public is to embrace science and evidence-based practice and use various technologies. But the problem is if you erase and you eradicate, then you're eroding the foundation that you're built on. And quite frankly, those of us that have been in the profession for a number of years, we have a real need to pass on what we've learned, what we know, our empirical knowledge and our experience and our wisdom and the little things that can make a difference in a practice. We have a need to do that. And I think that the younger generations have been so wounded by the previous generations not taking personal accountability and responsibility for those big issues like the housing crisis and the climate crisis and the other crisis. They feel really disenchanted and they feel wounded, and they don't, and they want to repel. They don't want to listen. So that's a real problem in our Western culture in general, but very specific. It's very tragic to our discipline that relies so heavily on our craft being passed on to the next generation through direct experience. I had a quote I wanted to share here if I could, and before that, I'll just shade, just as I think this is an example that's emblematic of the problem. I went on my provincial Ontario provincial regulator and representative websites recently because I wanted to see what they had to say about the history of massage. You would think these long established organizations would have quite a bit to say about history. The regulator had one short paragraph, very brief, on the date of the Drugless Practitioners Act. That was it in terms of the history of massage. And our provincial representative that represents the interest of massage therapists, they had nothing, absolutely nothing. And so I contacted them, and they kindly did put, I think, 3 or 4 paragraphs now. But it really doesn't capture the rich history of this discipline. So I think this is emblematic of the problem we have in the West, but in our discipline, is the idea that we're ignoring everything that's come before and we're just focusing. And Stephen Jenkinson wrote a book, Come of Age: The Case for Elderhood in a Time of Trouble. And I think this is helpful. How are you to persist in a time bent on undoing what precedes it? How are you to persist in a time bent on undoing what precedes it? And I think about the contributions that social media could make to our discipline. I mean, I was very excited when Facebook came on because I thought, here I am working in isolation with my patients one-on-one. Now I get to talk to my other colleagues who I only see once a year at the annual general meeting or maybe at a workshop somewhere. Now we get a chance to develop and nurture the things that we're all so anxious to talk about, to develop. And of course, what social media should be is an ongoing dialogue and debate that is dignified, that our opinions are based on information and fact, that is collegial in nature. And unfortunately, it often denigrates into individuals just trying to score intellectual esteem points and jabs and many people leaving the discussion because they just don't want to deal with the drama and an unproductive nastiness. And maybe as a part of this, I would say we have to be really careful that the proposal that we're follow the science. Let's listen to the science. And I certainly subscribe to evidence literacy and capacity, and am a big supporter uh, of science, and have made personal contributions to the Massage Therapy Foundation myself. But I'll say that let's be careful that we don't lose the art of massage as we're pursuing the science. Let's not turn it into a scientism, which is an ideological dogma, but true science is a method of curiosity and inquiry. And let's make sure that we're promoting true science, not just a form of scientism. So I think that eradicating history of our discipline is a dangerous business. I think we're subject, what if we try to water and dilute and make us all the same. And well, what we're seeing, right, is a commercialization of massage. We're seeing that individuals with less development and nobility in the profession, with less investment in the profession, they're just copying the techniques, and they're inexperienced, and they're hacking basically, and they're undermining the spirit of the discipline. And Sandy Fritz, in her interview with you, said history pulls us together. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's what history does, is it branches and threads all of the generations together. And David Lauderstein as well, he said that massage is one of the non-verbal humanities, and I love that description. It's how distinct our profession and our discipline is. So I think that massage is something that grows you and develops you meditatively and contemplatively. I mean, it's the best work, really. I mean, where can you go to work otherwise, where you can meditate all day and you can be in your thoughts and in your sensibilities, and not just the visual or auditory or the exteroceptors, but tuning into our interoceptors and tuning into the interoceptors of our people on the table. It's wonderful work. Betty Vaughn, in his interview with you, said the role of massage therapists are to keep people connected to their humanness through touch. And I think that's beautiful. And I'll just maybe wrap up my long-winded answer to you here by quoting something from Dean Juhan from his Job's Body Handbook from Bodywork. Juhan says, evolutionary sophistication has irretrievably forced humans to be clever in order to use our heritage for survival. Our somatic education cannot be left to the unconscious unfolding of instincts and reflexes. The rich potentials of our sophisticated biological inheritance necessitate some kind of consciousness, exploratory and systematic way of teaching ourselves and our offspring how to successfully use, not abuse, the potent range of physical and mental possibilities contained with us. So that's why history is important.
In a nutshell, right? Don, I'm buying your premise on everything that you're saying. I'm buying the premise that younger generations are repelling due to a disenfranchised feeling. And so if they're repelling and essentially, destroying the foundation, the scaffolding of the profession, it is my hope that this podcast in some small way can start to bridge gaps of connection, because to me, it's evident that we're parched, we're starving for some connection. But how do we connect when we have such, like you've talked about, such nastiness and such repellent forces, the darker sides of our natures, so to speak?
Yeah, that's an excellent and necessary question, Kirby. I mean, we have quite a tradition here, and if you look around the world, all of the strife and the angst, and I mean, look what the pandemic did to our culture in terms of loneliness and isolation, and possibly long-term effects of not having physical touch or not having social engagement. I mean, we've in our recent history, we've faced a lot of trials and tribulations, and I'm sure we're all feeling a low level of, or in some cases, a high level of anxiety at any given moment. So our discipline is really important. If we're looking for solutions to what currently ails humanity, our discipline can contribute something very important. And so to answer your question about what can we do to, beyond this wonderful podcast, what can we do to link the generations together to get massage therapists, practitioners, and associated individuals talking together and working together? I would recommend that we, first of all, engagement is the key thing. So my experience, and maybe others on the line will have a different experience, I see my own colleagues relatively infrequently. We have an annual general meeting with our representative once a year. We have the conference, which has increasingly been virtual since the pandemic, so not even a person-to-person engagement anymore. I notice workshops are still running, but so in other words, the chance for us to engage and interact is very minimal. Another problem is, we've talked about this already, is that when we have a representative organization, we tend to hand over responsibility to them to do the hard work so that we can just focus on the day-to-day. And I think we need to change our mindset and figure out how we can be more engaged. So social media is certainly an opportunity if we have the proper rules of engagement, and if it's properly policed, that if you have individuals that are not properly using the rules of engagement, that they're removed so that the discussion can continue in a dignified and productive way. But I would also love to see symposia. We have critical questions in our profession. One very simple example is a vernacular to describe the histological changes of the muscles and connective tissue when we work with people. So you know, Kirby, in your own experience, you'll treat somebody on day one, and then say by treatment 4 or 5, when you're massaging them, the tissue has changed. Well, how do you describe that? What kind of words do you use other than tense and ropey and stringy, those colloquialisms? What are some real terms that we can use to describe that and demonstrate the real beneficial effects of what we do? Another discussion we need to have is, how can we open up the profession more, be more inclusive and diverse? So we're treating people of all ethnicities and social backgrounds and financial situations and beliefs and traditions. How can we become more inclusive that way, so that we can offer massage to a broader number of human beings, not just the narrow confines that we have now? Another example is that whole discussion about identity. Instead of trying us all to make massage therapists just be one thing, let's talk about the populations that we serve and the particular needs they have. So there's all sorts of things we need to talk about. And what I notice at the AGM is people will stand up with a question for the organization, but really just to share. They just want to share their experience, and they'll talk, and the organization tries to contain the question and answer time so we can get out in time. But massage therapists would love to talk more. So I would love to see symposia where we gather together on critical questions we have as a discipline that we want to work through. I'd love to see roundtable discussions. Maybe we could do that here on the podcast, where you have a number of guests on at the same time talking about a particular issue and trying to wrap our heads around it and move it forward in some way. So I think, and social media is, again, with rules of engagement, I think there's all sorts of ways we could be talking to each other and engaging and interacting, and not relying just on our professional representatives but to ourselves be advocates, to be agents. Because I think professional organizations in our discipline have two roles. One is to, of course, make us better practitioners, help us to critically think and become research literate and develop our craft, our technical prowess at certain skills. Those things we certainly need help for our so everybody can so what we've learned can become tacit knowledge for everybody in the discipline. But we also need our professional organizations to help us become better advocates. So training at the local level in public and media relations, in government relations, in insurer relations, help us to become agents of the profession so that the almost 350,000 of us in Canada and the United States can actively, on an ongoing regular basis, be the voice of the profession and educate the public. I mean, can you imagine what if we were all applied, if we were all employed in that measure? Can you imagine what we could do? So I would say for the generations to, for those of us that are older, recognize we've contributed to that distance of the younger generations, calling them, those young whippersnappers, and we've contributed to the problem by expecting that they don't have as much experience as we do, and so they're not to be listened to. We need the younger generations, their vitality, their freshness in perspective, their innovation. We need the younger generations to help as the engine to keep the profession moving forward. And the younger generations need the older generations to point out the pathways not to go, the mistakes that have been made and the things that have been learned and the things you don't want to recreate the wheel on, you want to benefit. And for both the generations to talk about, okay, now that we have these theories and philosophies of care, how can we apply that empirically generated evidence, the evidence of experience, to rigorous research practice so that we can test and we can understand and we can learn new things about how actually physiologically massage works and how we affect people behaviorally, posturally, how massage can be incorporated with even more populations we haven't tapped into yet and address their concerns. So we've got a lot to lose here, and but we've got a lot to gain if we work together. So I think if the multiple generations can recognize that and make time in symposia and on social media and in roundtable discussions and find ways to gather and come together in hubs, and dialogue and debate and argue, and you work through all of the stuff to get ultimately to the really good stuff, the evolved thinking. I have great hopes and aspirations for what our discipline can do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what more is there to say than what you've touched on in that response, Don? And I couldn't agree more. Tell me, what message would you like to leave for future generations in massage therapy?
Well, I think I touched on it in terms of we need to spend more time together, and I would say we need to bypass that silo-ish tendency we have just to stay to our own little practices and not venture out and talk to each other. So primarily, I think the engagement and the interaction is really important. And I would also like to say, and this has been covered by a number of your other excellent, your other speakers on the podcast, in that there's a nobility to this art. There's a specialness, and it can't be replaced by robots. It can't be replaced by machines. It can be, maybe they can augment, but they can't replace the work that we do when we work fully engaged in our sensibilities with the sensibilities of the person on the table. This is important, necessary, essential, and noble work. And we're all fortunate to be working in it. And I would just hope that we all remind ourselves of that on a regular basis. And, your podcast is contributing to that larger recognition and realization of that. And I hope we can, I hope our decision makers will move away from the hierarchical organization where small groups of volunteers or small operation teams are trying to manage the profession, and as a result of their limited resources are challenged to do so. I would like to say to our decision makers, find ways to engage all massage therapists and invite them in and have them be part of the solution to advancing our profession and moving it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think we should touch on before we finish up today?
No, I think I've given my impassioned argument and for the preservation of history, the importance of history, and the importance of our generations kicking the current Western pop culture in terms of isolating themselves and finding a way to work together. So I think I've covered that fairly substantially, and you've done a wonderful job, Kirby, of keeping me on track and directing me in terms of being able to say these things. So thank you very much, and thank you for the excellent work you're doing with the Society of Massage Archives.
Well, I want to be sure and thank you because your passion and your thoughtfulness in your responses and the way that you think about history and massage and the importance of it is it's really a wonder to witness, Don. So I thank you for that. Before we get out of here, I do have two closing thought questions. If you could preserve the story or the history of one practitioner who is now deceased, who do you wish you could preserve their story for future generations?
Some of them are deceased and some of them are still alive but aging. Certainly Ida Rolf, in terms of more of her history. I would say most of my references are probably still alive, but need to be captured, before they pass on. So I've mentioned some of the names already. Dean Johann, I would love to see Dean Johann and his discussion of the history and the Paul St. John. I think he was really caused me to think about how I was applying things. You've had a number of people already, and greatly enjoyed hearing their reflections and the richness as well. Would love to see Grace Chan, who is the co-founder of the school I went to, and her partner Christine Sutherland talk on that as well. And Pamela Fitch, who's done some phenomenal work on boundaries and ethics and understanding our connection to the person on the table, would love to see her. So I think, thankfully for me, most of them are still alive, but we do need to capture their perspectives before we all get too old and pass on.
Time slips through all of our fingers, and here at the Society, we just try to hold on to it in these hands of history.
Yeah.
Don, what do you have coming up next? Anything to promote or any way that people can get in contact with you to learn more?
Sure. Well, my website is Don Dillon. That's DonDillon -RMT. That's as in registered massage therapist. So DonDillon-RMT.com. And I've written a number of my thoughts there that are related to more political and historical aspects of massage therapy culture within the framework I understand, with largely Ontario, but Canada as well. And I have been invited to speak at Centennial College, which I'm excited to be doing in a month, to their graduating class. I get invited to massage schools now and again to speak to graduating classes. And then other than that, people can find on my website, there is a number of things there that I've written. And I do have a number of articles from Massage Therapy Canada magazine. Unfortunately, Massage Therapy Canada magazine was a victim, like many businesses were during the pandemic, where the publisher that publishes a number of large magazines. They just cut it. They just didn't have the financial support. So I'm hoping to put some of my past articles up on my website. It's a bit of a labor-intensive process, but I hope to be able to offer that soon. But would love to hear if anybody wants to email me. I'm at don@dondillon-rmt.com, and would love to hear from anybody who listened today and their thoughts on preserving our shared rich history.
I can speak firsthand that Don is a great collaborator, so if you have thoughts, don't fail to get in contact with Don in some way.
Thank you, Kirby.
Yeah. I want to thank you, Don, for joining us on this episode of the Hands of History podcast. And thank you again so much for being our first international guest. This has been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby.
Thanks, Don.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider donating to the Society of Massage Archives so we can continue to bring you this episode and other resources to fulfill our mission of preserving and integrating the historical knowledge of massage therapy's professional advocacy and traditional techniques to guide and enrich our contemporary practices. Thank you. You have been listening to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives. You can learn more about the Society at societyofmassagearchives.org. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. Do you know someone whose hands have helped shape the practice of massage? If you or someone you know would make a great guest for future episodes of this podcast, please email the Society at societyofmassagearchives@gmail.com. Society of Massage Archives, all one word, @gmail.com.